All right, step number 8. Now we're going to be putting the bottom into it, because right now we've put it all together with the lock miters, but we don't have a bottom in there yet. So we're just going to get a bottom put in here. We're going to cut a groove all the way around on the inside that our bottom will fit into there. So that's kind of what we're doing on this one. And we're going to use some plywood for the bottom. The reason for the plywood is it does not expand and contract. When we glued our panels on here, remember I told you don't glue the panel inside here because it expands and contracts. Plywood does not do that. And so we're going to do that for our bottom, so we don't have to worry about our bottom expanding and contracting and busting our board apart here. So that's one advantage of plywood. It says, assemble your storage chest together with no glue and measure how wide and long your project is from the outside to outside. It should be close to 22 by 12, and write your measurement here and have you write this down. When you put this thing together, these should be 12 inches, these should be 22 inches long. It should be something close like that, but you may have had this shorter a little bit or a little bit longer, but I want you to put it together and make sure if you've got like some gaps like I do here, that you push on those nice and tight to just make sure everything's nice and tight so there's no gaps when you're measuring this out. And we're just going to take your tape measure and just go on the outside to outside to get these measurements here. And I'm measured from outside to outside, and I've got 22 and like 1/16 on that. And then over this way I'm measuring, and I am actually 11 and 15/16. It's close to 22 by 12, but I'm just off just a little bit. It doesn't matter if you're not exactly on what the paper says, but I want you to write down what your measurements are for yours, because we're going to customize your bottom to your actual project. So my length on mine was 22 and 1/16, and my width was actually 11 and 15/16. So whatever yours is, write that down on. Okay, next it says get a pre-cut bottom piece of plywood from the wood storage room. They're stacked in a pile on the floor. And so I've already pre-cut these, you know, those sheets of plywood, they come 4 feet by 8 feet. They're massive. They're kind of a pain to move around. So I've gone ahead and pre-cut those for you. And they're back in the wood storage room, just right on the floor. I want to take you back there and show you where those are at. So come on over to the wood storage room. So here in the wood storage room, I've got just a stack of some plywood here. Just in a pile here. They're pre-cut. They're a little bit bigger than what you need right now. And so we're going to have to trim it down lengthwise and widthwise as well. We've got to go trim it down, so let's come over to the table saw to do that. Okay, so next after we found our bottom here, it says use the table saw to cut the bottom to the correct dimensions. And it says it should be 1 inch less than the length and width of the outside dimensions of our storage chest. So I wrote down on mine 22 and 1/16 long, 11 and 15/16 wide. That's what my storage chest was. We want to have your bottom cut 1 inch smaller. Both ways. 1 inch smaller lengthwise, 1 inch smaller widthwise. You don't need to measure and mark. Just set your fence on the table saw and just do both these cuts on the table saw. So if my length was 22 and 1/16, I want to set my fence to 21 and 1/16, 1 inch smaller. It doesn't matter which one of these you do first. You can just get them both cut. We're going to cut it this way. Just keep it nice and tight on the fence when you're making this cut. Okay, and then my other direction, it says it's 11 and 15/16, so I need to set my fence to 10 and 15/16, or whatever 1 inch smaller is. So okay, you're going to have to take your storage chest apart, and we're going to head on this panel router right here that we can cut our groove on the inside bottom, right across on all your boards here. You got to make sure when you put your board on the panel router that you're actually setting it up so it cuts on the inside bottom. Some people I've had, they accidentally put their boards the wrong way, and then it's cutting the groove on the inside top. Or they have their board flipped out this way and their groove gets cut on the outside. So you got to really think about how you're placing your board on the router to get this cut. So on our paper it says, use the panel router to route a groove on the inside bottom of each of your side, front, and back panels. Place your panel with the inside facing out, the top edge tight against the stop block, and then clamp your panel tight with a hand screw clamp. So when you come over here to the panel router and use it, I've already got a stop block set up exactly where it needs to be. Don't move that stop block. Leave it right there. It should be clamped on there. It's not going to move on you. So please leave that alone. It says you want the top to go against the stop block. So make sure you know which part is the top. And the inside of it's facing out. And you're going to just set that so the stop block, set this so that the top of this is nice and tight on that stop block. If there's a gap, I'll come close so you can see this little gap here. If there's a gap, you need to make sure that your board is pressed up against that stop block so there's no gap. And then you've got to hold this thing really tight with the clamp. So take another hand screw clamp or another clamp, and it's got to be on there really, really tight. And this sometimes takes another person to help hold things while you're clamping and getting it set on here. But again, just make sure that this thing is clamped on really tight, that your board's not going to move on you in this process. Because what our panel router does, it just has a router set up inside here, and there's a bit that's just a straight cutting bit, and it's about 3/4 of an inch thick on diameter, and it's just going to cut a groove down our board there for the bottom to fit into. Again, it's got to be clamped really tight. It's got an on-off switch here, and then you're just going to take these handles and pull them all the way down until it stops at the bottom, and then you're going to lift it back up when you pull it back up. Okay? It is kind of loud. It does throw some shavings. Absolutely make sure you have glasses on because it tends to throw the shavings right towards your face. So we'll turn it on here. Go slow. All the way down. Back up, and it's going to cut our little groove. Take that out of there. One thing that this particular bit is, it's actually just a hair small in comparison to our bottom thickness. And so when I pulled this down, I actually kind of tweaked it to the side a little bit when I pull it down. And on my way back up, I actually tweak it to the other side, just a hair, enough that it cuts that slot a little bit bigger. So that your bottom should fit in here. Take your bottom, it should just fit nice and easy into that groove there. And you're going to do that same process on all your boards. Your two small end panels and also your front and back panels. On your front and back ones, again, same thing, you want to have that top edge against the stop block. And we're doing the inside bottom. These ones, you're just having to pull it down a little bit more. If you get a whole bunch of sawdust built up, clear all that stuff out of there so that'll sit nice and tight. If there's a gap, hold it tight against the stop block so there's no gap. Clamp this thing on there really, really tight so it's not going to move on you. We've had a lot of people have issues with not being able to clamp this tight enough, and their board ends up moving on them in the middle of their cut. And then their groove gets cut down, and if the board moves, your groove's going to suddenly just kind of not be straight anymore. So have it clamped really, really well, and go slow. If this bit bogs down because you're going too fast, you got to shut it off and raise it back up and go on again. So nice and slow. And again, as long as this thing's not going to move, it'll be nice and straight. But if it moves on you and that groove gets cut at an angle or whatever, or goes crooked, you may want to just reclamp it, cut it again, and straighten it up, make it nice and straight. you don't want to screw this up because we've taken all this time putting these together, and if we screw it up now, you get handed step number 1 again, and you have to start with step 1, and no one wants to do that. Okay. So again, once we get them all cut, we're going to just fit these all together. Try to make sure everything fits really well before gluing it. We want to make sure everything slides in nice, fits together, all the pieces line up right inside the grooves there. And just get me to look at it to make sure that this actually fits well, with no gaps on the inside anywhere, that bottom's actually cut the right size. Once I've seen it, I'm not signing anything yet, I just want to say, okay, yeah, you're good to glue. So it says put glue in the lock miters and the bottom grooves and use several bar clamps to clamp your storage chest together. Be sure to have the clamps on top and bottom and all sides. You're going to need about 6 bar clamps for this, at least. And we're going to have to glue it all the way where the lock miters came together, as well as where the bottom groove is in there as well. You can take this whole thing apart, put glue and everything, put it all back together. An easier way to do this, if you want, you tip your project on its side, take off one of the faces, also in these grooves here. Not very much, just a little bit. Put some in the dado and the groove there where the bottom fits. And we'll stick this one on. You can spread this around if you want. Smear it around. A bit. Line things back up, make sure everything fits. Flip it around, get our other side. Just a little bit. You don't want so much it's going to squeeze out everywhere, and then you have to wipe it all up everywhere as much. If some does squeeze out when we clamp this together, we're just going to wipe it up with a wet paper towel. Up, fits together, and then we'll tip it up and we'll throw our clamps on it. When you put these clamps on, don't do so much pressure that it cracks the boards. We're just going to do a little bit of pressure. Just a little small amount. Just enough to snug it up, but not enough to put pressure on it to crack. Top and bottom. I like to have it so the handles hang off the bench, so you can turn these handles without it hitting into the bench. Just a little bit of pressure, not much. And on this side, small little amount. Got to work fairly quickly because the glue dries within about 5 minutes. And you got to let it set for at least 30 minutes. Last 2 clamps I'm going to put across the face. Just to get some pressure this way as well. But again, don't tighten them so tight that it ends up bending your boards. Just enough pressure to get it on there. One more. That's this face. And then just let that sit and dry. If you do see any glue squeeze out on the inside or anything like that, we want to get that wiped up. So like right here, I've got some glue squeezing out on the inside, maybe a little bit right there on the inside. The outside doesn't matter if there's glue squeezing out on the outside, it's just the inside that we need to make sure gets wiped up. So get a wet paper towel and wipe up anything on the inside there. And that way it'll be a lot easier once it's done. Cleaned up, put together, get my signature, and you should be done. Looks good.